Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast, where the art and science of operational excellence come to life through captivating stories of triumph, challenge, and transformation from the front lines of industry. Our distinguished guests, from manufacturing pioneers and medical device innovators to aerospace visionaries, diagnostic lab leaders, and major capital project leaders, unveil the hidden patterns and powerful insights that drive exceptional results in the complex world of operations. Join us on this journey of discovery as we explore the brilliant minds behind the systems that make our world work and uncover the leadership secrets that could revolutionize your approach to operations forever. Here is your host, Ed Pound.
Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast. Our guest today leads continuous improvement and operational excellence for a company whose products touch millions of people every day. They help people see the world more clearly, literally. Their company is one of the world's leading manufacturers of precision optical lenses, producing prescription eyewear for major brands and retailers, including some you probably have in your own glasses right now. From high-tech CNC machining and vacuum ion deposition to world-class lean and flow systems, this team has turned the art of making lenses into a science of precision, speed, and customer focus. A great example of this is how they transformed a process that used to take 72 hours into a 24-hour turnaround without sacrificing quality or sanity. It's the kind of transformation that shows what happens when science, discipline, and teamwork come together in operations. Please join me in welcoming to the podcast, Stefano Relli. Welcome, Stefano. How are you today?
Happy to be here. I'm doing great, Ted.
Great. It's good to have you. It'll be an interesting conversation, particularly based on our initial conversations. Let's dive right into it. You've had a fascinating career journey from growing up in Italy, studying and working in Mexico, to leading operations in the United States. How has that international perspective shaped your approach to operations and leadership and operations excellence?
Mainly, I think the fact that I was exposed to multicultural environments from a very young age. Grew up in a Italian family in Mexico, so from the get-go, as I was growing up as a teenager and then in university in Mexico, definitely had that multicultural exposure. And then when I started working in Mexico, I was working with a French-American company, and there was another doses of cultural shock between working with Mexican people and working in the Mexico organizational culture with managers from the US and a company with French organizational culture. And then I had the great opportunity to come to the US and work in the US, which then had two cultural shocks. One from a personal perspective in living, moving from Mexico to the US, but also working, managing in Mexico and then managing in the US had its own set of challenges. So what that has given me is two things. One, although I'm not the most flexible person, by nature I'm very organized and very structured and very analytical, which matches very well with continuous improvement and operations and lean.
Yeah, it's good to have a routine.
Exactly. On the other hand, it may also hinder you a little bit because you lose a little bit of flexibility, and change and things like that may be a little bit difficult to absorb.
It's a balance.
Correct. And with all these changes and with all this exposure to different cultures and different environments and different ways of working and different ways of thinking, I gain a lot of flexibility. One. Second, you become sensitized, you become sensible, you become more aware of these differences. And so later on, I had an opportunity to work as an internal consultant for operational excellence in an organization where I was going out to different facilities, providing operations excellence support. And these different facilities had their own culture, their own organizational culture, because we grew by acquisition. And so we acquired not only the business, but we also acquired the organizational culture with it. And so it allowed me to be able to tune into that culture, tune into how they were working, what were the touch points of that culture, the pain points of that culture, and adapt and modify my approach to it in a way that, one, I was accepted by that culture and not, totally be perceived as a total stranger in that culture. And then also helped me tailor the approach to continuous improvement, to operations excellence, uh, to that organizational culture, and help us be more effective in the approach. So that's what has helped me a lot.
Sure. So let me just play that back to you. What I hear is that the experience gives you exposure to different cultural norms. So that sort of sensitizes you to when you come into a situation to look for clues that maybe people who live in the culture wouldn't otherwise see. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's a fair statement. It happens to all of us, right? If we are very used to the culture in an organization, the way that typically you will hear it as, no, this is the way we do things, Stefano. You don't understand. This is how we do things around here. That would give you a clue of how ingrained the culture is in a specific organization. And so that's, to begin with, that's a good signal that you may have to listen and observe and look for clues, right? But that's very natural. It happens to all of us. So yeah, the experience that I've had with these multicultural things that happen in my life have helped me to be a lot more, I guess, a lot more sensitive to it, and be able to be effective with that.
Yeah, I can relate. I worked for 2 years, about 2.5 years actually, in Japan, and I came to appreciate Japanese are typically very taciturn, very they don't show a lot of emotion, and I came to realize, for instance, that like a raised eyebrow uh, or like a slight frown could mean big trouble if you didn't pay attention to it, and it was really it was a great learning experience in that regard. Are there any specific differences you would see between, say, Mexican culture and American culture or French culture?
Well, French and Mexican are probably more. There's more touch points because they're both Latin. So they're not time based as much as the American, and a lot more social in terms of the relationships, even at work. And so I'll give you an example. In Mexico, typically, if you come to work and you start your round and you start talking to people and saying good morning, it's that good morning is not just good morning. It's how you're doing, how's your family, and how's your son. And there's always this social component to your conversation with this good morning. And usually you shake hands. It's doesn't matter if it's a colleague that you have known for 10 years. Good morning, shake hands. And there's about a 5-minute conversation with this colleague about, not about work, but about family and social things. And whereas when I came to the US, I found things to be a lot more curt. It's like hello, hello, good morning, and off you go into do your things. That's kind of a subtle difference, but that one that you know
So, Stefano, let's talk about make to order versus make to stock. You mentioned that your team produces custom prescription lenses in a make to order environment. For listeners who might not be familiar with that kind of system, what makes it so challenging compared to traditional mass production?
So in most of the lean approaches, the lean case studies, and for that matter, the Toyota production system, which is the bedrock of lean, will have has manufacturing systems that make to inventory, more or less. Even though you have just in time, or if you have a pull system from a customer at the end of this manufacturing process or service for that matter, but you have pull systems basically. And in a pure lean system, you will have a signal from a customer that will tell you where, in what quantity, what product, what kind of product you will manufacture through the production or the value stream. And that signal will then be transmitted upstream until the beginning of that value stream, and then that's how you fulfill an order. And in a made-to-order environment, that kind of turns in its head because you do not have that, you don't have the signal at the end. Because it's made to order, the signal comes from the front of the value stream. It comes from the front of the production system, which then makes it a little bit different. And so you have to find different approaches to how to establish pull in a pull system, in a push system. This made to order is like a push. The customer is actually pushing an order to you. It's sending you an order and it's saying, I expect this order in X amount of time. It could be 24 hours, it could be next day, it could be 7 days. It depends, right? Depends on the product, it depends on what kind of expectation or service level agreement you have with your customer. But the fact is that it's a push. And in our case, it's a high variable demand, high product mix, and that makes it even more challenging. So that's where we had to rethink how to approach lean, not inside the process. Inside the process, the tenets of lean, tenets of controlling working process, balancing your operations, removing waste, efficiencies, matching times, matching resources, balancing, all those still work as they should or are applicable as they should. The only difference is that you have to really think, how are you going to absorb the orders? How are you going to
Manage variability.
manage the variability from the start and the orders? And so what we not came up with, but what we realized is that in a made-to-order environment, you end up with a push-pull system. You push all the orders, and then for a lack of a better word, you have a supermarket or you have a work in progress, a form of prioritization, so you can level load and you can prioritize the orders through your process in a way that the lead time for each one of them it can be achieved. And from there you pull. Then you start pulling the orders from there. That's the push-pull system that in essence, you have.
That's interesting. I will tell you that my experience with push versus pull is, they're kind of subjective terms, right? I mean, where does it push? Where does it pull? I've got a very specific solution to that. I mean, in operations science, you have throughput, you have work in process, you have capacity, and you have variability. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to maintain the right amount of work in process to get the throughput that you want at minimum cycle time. And my view is that whether you call it push or pull or kick or shout or jump, it really doesn't matter, right? I mean, you want to set up the mechanics so that you get the output that you want. And it sounds like you guys have come up with a pretty good approach to that. Talk about just a little bit before we go a little bit more into the operational excellence angle, what the product is and who your customers are.
Yes. So the product is this, or more to the yes, but not the frame. It's actually the lenses, the prescription lenses. So our part of the process is to manufacture the lenses themselves to the prescription that is required. And then in some cases, we will send the lenses with the prescription out to a customer for the customer to cut them and to the shape of a frame and then insert them in the frame for their customers. Or we would do what we call a complete order, where the customer sends us the frame, we manufacture the lenses, and then we cut the lenses to the shape of the frame, mount them, and ship the complete job back to the customer. So we have a variety of customers, which it's good for us because it helps us overcome certain commercial and seasonality challenges. But on the other hand, it also creates challenges with service levels agreements because we have different ones for different customers. So in essence, we have retail accounts. So retail accounts is big optical accounts like Warby Parker, for instance.
Oh, okay. These are Warby Parkers. Okay.
So that would may or may have come from us. We don't know because we're sort of like their secondary manufacturers. They have their own manufacturing, but if they have capacity issues, then they offload some of their capacity to us.
Flexible capacity.
Yes, right. Then there's also big opticians groups or optical groups, and they also buy this. And then there's eye care practitioners, so local eye care practitioners, local opticians, or local doctors that also, after you do your exam, they sell you a frame and they sell you the lenses, and so they place the order with us, and then we manufacture it for them and then ship that out for them. So, and we also serve our own facilities because we are a hub for we have a hub and spoke system. So we are a hub that sends what we call uncuts. So the lenses have the prescription, but they haven't been cut, and then they are sent out to a sister facility to us, where they will be cut and placed in the frame to be in close proximity to the customer. So we have a number of those facilities in the U.S. that we have, and we have two big hubs, one in Minneapolis and one in Dallas. So that's our business in a.
Your raw material, one second, are polycarbonate lenses, or what is it? Do you actually grind the optics of the lens?
Yes, that's correct. So the raw material is the lenses themselves, or plastic pucks, if you will. And these plastic pucks are made of different plastic materials of different refractive indexes. And the only difference that you will see cosmetically for you is that the higher the index of that plastic, the thinner the lens is going to be for the same prescription. So if you have a high prescription, you like to have a high index lens so that it doesn't look thick. It doesn't look thick in your frame. So there's polycarbonate, there's regular CR39 plastic, and then there's also some high index plastic that I can't remember the exact chemical name of it, but anyway, exotic plastics. Yeah. But in essence, the processing really for us doesn't change much. Regardless of the material that we're processing, there may be some cycle time changes in some of the machining of that product because of the differences in material, but otherwise it doesn't make much of a difference for us.
So how long does it take? What's the cycle time when you get in a raw product to turn it into a lens if you're going to, ship that lens? And obviously, depending on what you're doing, there's a range. So what's the range of cycle times that you have?
Well, here's also another kicker for us. It really depends a lot on the type of treatment or type of extra treatments that we're going to put on the lenses, because the main process to put the prescription on the lenses, cycle time is probably 30 minutes or so. It's very short. It's very, very short. CNC machining, polishing, a little bit of cool time for a step in the process. So in essence, very quickly you can get that lens, the prescription on a lens, extremely quickly. However, most lenses, because they're plastic, most lenses will get some kind of scratch resistance.
Okay, sure.
And that process does take longer. It's the lead time in a coating process. It's a little bit longer because the cycle times are also longer, and it's a batch processing. It's a thin layer coatings on the lenses for the scratch resistance. And then we have also anti-reflective coating. Your lenses are anti-reflective. These are anti-reflective. We don't see any reflections from the lights. Very useful for night and for day and for clarity. But that requires, as you mentioned in the beginning, that requires to put the lenses in a high vacuum chamber where we do ion deposition. And so these are big batches of product. And so the lead times there, I would estimate to be maybe around 12 hours, maybe, for that process. And so it's still relatively short, but you're going from 30 minutes to 12 hours, right? Mostly for the batching, exactly.
Scale-wise, that's a big difference. Yeah.
Right. Now, coming out of that, you're going to what we call finishing, which is where we cut the lenses to the shape of the frame, and if needed, we mount them into the frame. And the cycle time then, again, is very quick. Cutting the lenses is probably a cycle time of 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the type of lens. Yeah, it's very quick, depending on the type of lens and a few other characteristics. And then mounting and packaging it is probably another 10 minutes. So we're talking about cycle times that are not bad. Yeah.
All right, so that's a good description of what the process is, what the product is, who the customers are. So let's get back then to, so you're dealing with this issue, you've got make to order, the orders just show up, you don't know exactly what it's supposed to be. Describe, you mentioned the push-pull. You also mentioned when we talked prior to the podcast, something you call a combobulator system. I love that name. Please explain that if you would.
So this is a solution, in a sense, an electronic solution. It's Kamishiba. It's like a Kamishiba board for our orders, but it's an electronic one. So basically, what happens is that we receive all the orders electronically, which is a big advantage. We don't have to enter anything by hand, or in the past we would receive orders by fax and things like that. Which, yeah, oof. Anyways,
Those were the days.
yeah, well, those were the days. But nowadays, it's all electronic. And so orders from the customers drop into our system. Think about it as it's not really an ERP, but it's kind of like it's not whole enterprise system, but it is like a manufacturing system, an MRP, right? Manufacturing Resource Planning System. We call it LMS, Lab Manufacturing System, but that's what it is. Anyways, so the orders plop into the system, and when they plop into the system, you mentioned the combobulator, which really is a job queue. It's a virtual job system.
Yeah, we call that a virtual queue. Right. Okay.
Basically, a virtual queue. And what we can do then is, depending on the type of order, and we determine that we can modify this at our convenience, or as depending on what we need from our flow and from our value stream and for our processes. We flag the orders in a certain way with certain priorities, and they drop in buckets, virtual buckets. And in these virtual buckets, they're always fivefold. So there's always, first in, first out. And so when we need orders, when we need to launch the orders into our process, when we print them. We print basically a paper order that goes into a tray that will travel with the lenses through our process, and it has barcodes that tell the machines what to do with that order, tapping into the system. And so that printing is the launching, is when we launch the order into the process. And so by having this the repository, one, it allows us to sort the orders in any way, shape, or form we want, because we can modify that sorting according to what we need. Say that we get a new customer or a different type of process, we can modify the buckets. And we do that. We do that with certain regularity, depending on what our needs are. But the other part that is extremely important is that we keep FIFO in that bucket, because it's virtual. It's virtual, right? And so one key, though, is to keep small batches, print small batches out of it. Because it's a push-pull system, we have a tendency, or there's always a tendency to create big batches. Oh, let's print 2 hours worth of orders in launch time. May be okay, because we're going to consume them in 2 hours, but what if there are other orders in that queue in those 2 hours that have priority over some of the orders that already, or which lead time is longer, and now we haven't launched them because we launched others before them.
Who's making that decision about what goes when?
So here's the we call it pre-production, but it's sort of like production control, and it's human. It's a human that makes that decision, really. And so what we do is we come up with like an hourly launch recipe. And in this recipe, we say, for the next hour, you're going to launch X amount of work. And in this X amount of work, you're going to mix in this type of products, if available. So, 20 of these, 50 of these, 35 of that, etc. If you don't have it, then substitute with this. So you have substitutions for those. So they're not wholly automated on purpose, because that way we can always have these substitutions, and there's a human element to it that helps us be flexible with it, because we have variability in how the orders come in, right? And also we work not quite 24/7, but almost 24/7. And so, for instance, at night, orders don't come in because the eye care practitioners and others are closed, and so at night the recipes cannot change because we are depleting that queue, and then substitutions become more important, for instance, compared to the morning.
Okay, that's fascinating. So it sounds like, and when you're releasing work, you're maintaining the amount of work in the production process, right? I mean, it's not going too high, not going too low.
Now what you're saying, Ed, is one of the most challenging aspects that we found in operations like ours, right? When you have pull systems, pure pull systems, it's a little bit easier to control work in progress because you have these signals, right? You're manufacturing to or producing or fulfilling something. You stop it because you don't need to, or you haven't gotten another signal in the value stream. There's points where you just don't you stop, right? You just I'm done. You're full. Okay, I can go do something else. In ours, because it's pull, is push pull, then we're pulling. Once we pull from the front, then we have to have a lot of discipline in our process. Because if it's not full, if we don't have fully automated systems in all places, and there's human intervention, so we have to make sure that we maintain FIFO everywhere as much as possible with visual management, with clear signals for everyone, and discipline, maintaining discipline. And then we also have to make sure that our equipment is capable, it's available, and is producing at the rates that we need, because otherwise we create unevenness, right? There's bottlenecks that are created in our process, and then the FIFO goes out the window. Impacts at the end are SLAs. So to us that's the key. Once we launch, we need to be very, very disciplined. The production people have to continuously monitor our production lines and make sure that product is flowing, nothing is stopping, nothing is accumulating. And if it accumulates, quick signals. If it gets to this point, what do we do? What is the quick action? How do we react quickly to that?
Okay, that sounds cool. Yeah, great. So you basically have floating capacity that you can move people around a little bit.
That's one of the keys with made to order. You have to have capacity. You have to have. In other words, you always have a finite capacity. You can't exceed it. We have this facility has an the one that I'm in Dallas has a X capacity, and beyond that,
Yeah, that's it.
do about it, right? I mean, we can run 24/7, but that's it. There's you can add more people, but the machines are what they are. Nothing we can do about it. However, if possible, then it becomes a game of not a game, but it becomes a strategy. How do we make sure? How can we offload some of that work that this facility has to other facilities, perhaps? We do have an outsourcing. We can outsource to an overseas facility if there's too much work in our combobulator to kind of level load ourselves, right? And that way, we keep our capacity to where it is at. You want to have, in a made to order, you always want to have that 85%. You want to have that cushion. You want to have that 20 to 15% capacity cushion, because any disruption, it's oof.
That's basic operations science. Well, it sounds like you guys have a good handle on that, because there are many people who don't understand that, and it just causes so much pain and stress because people, they overcharge the system with WIP and trying to keep everybody busy, and then everything's just a complete wreck.
No, I mean, we don't calculate anything to 100%.
That's awesome.
And when we do, it's a lot of headaches, a lot of headaches.
So switching just a little bit, now let's talk about sort of the people aspect of that. When we talked initially before the podcast, you mentioned that convincing supervisors and managers can sometimes be harder than engaging the front line. So what strategies have worked for you to get leadership aligned behind continuous improvement?
So yeah, and it's interesting because when we work with continuous improvement, and I'm always I've always worked in not always, but I've been working in continuous improvement for close to 25 years now, and we work for the customer. We work for a value, delivering value to the customer, and in doing that, we are delivering revenue for the company. We're reducing cost or improving efficiencies. In essence, we're improving the financial proposition for the business, right? And yet, when we go work in a manufacturing facility or in a process, an activity, could be also order entry or whatever, it doesn't matter. What's in it for them, right? I mean, you really need to think about how do I bring in down, scale it down, narrow down the scope a little bit more. And then for the people that work in the process, the best thing to do is to say, okay, how can we make your job easier, faster, better? How do we remove barriers for you? And oftentimes that's easier. In my experience, that's been the easiest part of the job.
Well, they can see immediately what your the benefit is, right?
And they know it because they do the job every day, right? We have very long shifts. We have 12-hour shifts. And so these people, heck, if after 1 year of working here, I bet you they know more about it than anybody else and their specific area in their specific process because they do it every day. They touch every day, they touch the product every day. Now, supervisors, team leads, managers, they don't spend a lot of time in their process often, because there's a lot of distractions, meetings, and other things. And so the same principle applies. What's in it for them? But yet, there's also a lot of competing priorities, a lot of competing messaging, a lot of competing goals, and a lot of unwritten rules, a lot of departmental interactions and politics and things like that.
Well, and the thing is, if you think about it from a leader standpoint, they're responsible for the results that happen from a change. I mean, the frontline worker is not going to get fired probably if you make a change and it doesn't work out very well. Yeah, that's different.
What I found also is that what happens at times is that a supervisor or a team lead that has promoted to supervisor or supervisor has been promoted to a manager position is because they have done certain things a certain way that they have been successful with it, and then now they promoted. Now you come in and then you say, well, there's a better way to do this. And to me, it's like, oh, wow, there's a better way. In their mind, it's like, oh, heck, we've been doing it wrong all this time, possibly. Or it's like, what do you know? What gives you the right to tell me what to do or not to do, right? So here's where you really, really have to be very astute. You have to be very intelligent, have that emotional intelligence to understand where people are coming from. If they have complaints or if they have negative attitudes about things, or if they have passive aggressive attitudes about things or changes, where is it coming from? What's driving that? And you do a lot of, I use the Socratic method a lot. So I ask a lot of questions, right? Because you have to understand, right? Talk to me about this, help me understand what's going on here. And I wish I could tell you this 100% accurate, 100% success.
Whoa, I wish you could tell me that too. I don't think I've seen anybody who has 100% success.
I cannot claim that. But in some cases, you do get to the point where it's like, well, let me help you with that. I think we have some ways that we can address those needs. And then you can use a lot of different techniques. You can use little pilots. You can use demonstrations. You can do small scale testing just to demonstrate the benefit of some of these things. Once managers and supervisors get a taste of success, get a taste of change, and that change is good or beneficial, then they tend to get along with, or get better at understanding that change is not challenging them or challenging their position. In some cases, doesn't work, and some other decisions have to be made as an organization. But that's been the most, to me, it has been the best way to address that middle level, right? The supervisors and the managers.
Yeah, that's great. That's great insight. Yeah, I mean that's just the way the world works, and you just have to deal with the people that you have. And as you mentioned, sometimes people just are not going to change no matter what. But that I find, in my experience, has been sort of the exception, not the rule, right? And particularly the other thing is, if you get the frontline folks saying this is a good idea, you're much more likely to get the support of the leadership.
And what has happened at times is that they end up being like the bologna in the sandwich, right? Because the leadership at top is going like, we need to do this. And then the operators and the associates on the floor are going like, yeah, we need to do this. And they get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, right? And then
Yeah, Right. And finally they're like, oh, it's a great idea. Yeah.
because the mayo and all that comes squeezed out of that, right? So yeah, and you get on board, and just like any other change, right? Some people get on board, some don't,
And you have early adopters and late adopters, and yeah.
absolutely. The defense seaters are the majority, right? They just see where the wind is going, and
Yes, exactly. Which is a completely rational thing to do, right? It makes sense.
absolutely, we all do, right? We all do with change. It's exactly the same thing that happens to all of us with change. So
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. This has been great discussion. I love hearing about the tales from the front line of operations excellence. So you mentioned that you grew up in an Italian family in Mexico, but what do you think about your youth? Were there any influences that kind of led you to where you are in continuous improvement?
I major in chemical engineering.
Okay, you're an engineer. Okay.
So yeah, and I think and a minor in industrial engineering. So I think I had some of that operations mindset from the get go. And I really never, well, when you start young, you know what you know, right? And you start your career, and
Yeah, and you think you know a lot. Yeah.
you think you know a lot and really don't. And for some reason, I ended up. Now I know why, but in my early career, I gravitated towards inspection and quality control. Okay, and then eventually, mid-career is where I got involved in Six Sigma first, and then Lean. And to me, it was just like very natural. It just came to me in a. I didn't struggle with it at all. It was like, oh, it makes complete sense to me. Yes, yeah, this is the way to do things.
How to be more efficient. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then I had the fortune of having an HR manager that recommended a strength based leadership book. It's from the Gallup group, and so you basically get a code, take an assessment, and they give you your five top strengths. Go figure. My five top strengths are matched perfectly well with continuous improvement. Consensus seeking, analytical, deliberate. Results oriented. So what I found is that the strengths that I have, my personality, the way I think, it's perfectly matched to continuous improvement. It's just that's why it comes so natural to me.
Like a hand in a glove. Great fit. Yeah.
It came at mid-career, but it came. So I'm very happy with it because to me, it's almost, I often describe it as a vocation for me. It's
Be very rewarding. Yes.
I have a lot of intrinsic rewarding out of it. It doesn't matter if a manager or a VP tells me that I'm doing a great job. No, what I get draw satisfaction of is seeing people do better, seeing they light up when they go like, oh, this is so much easier now, and oh yeah, I figured it out, and so it's very rewarding. It's extremely rewarding.
Well, we are similar souls in that regard. That's the whole idea with the Operation Science Institute is people create so much self-inflicted chaos and stress because they don't understand the basic relationships. Like you just mentioned, the fact that you never schedule anything at 100%. You would be shocked at how many people don't get that. And they don't understand, well, as I get busier and busier, do things happen more quickly or do they happen more slowly? Anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. But
Yeah, yeah. Oh, just try harder.
yeah. And once people get the science and understand the relationships, because it's universal, it makes it a lot easier for them. And to your point, they're like, oh gosh, and that's just magic. I mean, that's music to my ears, to hear somebody say, oh, one guy said, oh, we went through the training and then, we thought we had 30 problems and 60 solutions because we had 30 people working in the area and everybody's got two opinions. And then once we understood the science and how to apply it in our lean context, we realized we had 4 problems and we're all working on them. And just hearing that thing like, oh, 4 problems from 30, that's great. But then to hear people say we're all working on them, it's just that's the kind of thing that you long for in continuous improvement. Yeah.
And you mentioned something extremely important, right? The fact that if you work operations excellence the right way, you create alignment. You align things. You align teams. You align people around a purpose. Why do we do things? And in our case, it's a great purpose because we just yes we're for profit and we need to make money. Yeah. But at the same time, we are providing a product for someone to see better.
Yes, you are.
Using that, right? So even the operator even our associates on the floor that are working in the manufacturing process can relate because they may wear glasses most of the cases.
Or they certainly know somebody who wears glasses. So yeah.
Correct. So we can tell them, look, what you're making is going to help someone, a child, a grandma, young, an adult to see better. That's a great purpose, right? So we have that. We have that to align people around you. Then you also have to make sure that you have the proper KPIs and then track those KPIs and make sure that we have goals and then we're tracking to those goals because that aligns everybody.
Exactly. That is so important.
And then you cascade them down so that when there's gaps, you can then get people to work on those gaps and get them to get that sense of ownership and sense of pride in fixing issues and get them fixed and get better at it. So
absolutely, that's very rewarding.
Yeah. Tough to do, but
it is tough to do, but it's worth the effort. All right. So one last question on a personal note. You mentioned you love road cycling. Is that your favorite hobby? Do you have other hobbies? And what's your favorite place that you've ever been road cycling that you've ridden?
Probably the best one is that I rode in Florida. I did a ride for. I do rides every year. I do a ride for multiple sclerosis. So this is national. There's the MS 150. Yes. And so I've done maybe a dozen of them between Florida and Texas. But the one in Florida was, at least this one was kind of unique because it was my 50th birthday. So that was interesting. And I went back to Florida with some of my friends when I lived in Florida, and we went from Tampa to the middle of Florida. There's a Buck Tower. It's a park in the middle of Florida. So it was a very.
What time of year was that?
I want to say May. It was May.
Okay, so it was pretty hot, but it's not August.
Hot and humid, yeah. But yeah, we went out to Buck Tower and then came back to Tampa. So 2 days. It's a 2-day ride, but that was probably the one that I remember the best. But first, most of all because it was these friends of mine that I hadn't seen in a while, and they were my biking buddies back in the 90s when I lived in Florida. So
yeah, those shared experiences. I've got a backpacking group I do the same thing with, and it's great, and it's sort of that relates to when you're doing continuous improvement. Everybody got the shared experience of making work better. So
absolutely, and that social component.
Absolutely, yeah, great point.
Bike riding is it's a good social exercise as well. You do 2 hours, 3 hours worth of exercise, but you can still talk to somebody.
Yeah.
So, there's a nice social component to it.
Yes, definitely.
It's even more entertaining. So.
Awesome. Well, listen, Stefano, this is just a very fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it. Your love of continuous improvement just comes shining through, and a lot of good observations for the audience. So thanks so much for participating, and I wish you well. I'm sure we'll talk in the future.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate the invitation to the podcast. It was a pleasure to share my experience with you guys. I love continuous improvement. It's my bread and butter, and lean and operations are my passion. And so the more I talk about it, the better. So thanks a lot for the invitation.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Operations Science Podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. Join the Operations Science Institute at opscience.org. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode. The views expressed by our guests are their own and do not represent their company's views unless specifically stated as such.